and called on the Justice Department to take immediate action. Joining me live now, two of the members of Congress who were there, Gregory Meeks and Hakeem Jeffries. Thank you for joining us. Congressman Meeks, you have a lot of people here who are saying, when you think about a civil rights violation, we certainly know this nation's history and they should be burned in our minds, the names of Emmett Till and others who have suffered. And in this case, George Zimmerman could have profiled Trayvon Martin, but not be a quote-unquote card-carrying Klans member, as we've seen in the past commit these atrocities against African Americans. Well,
we know that he said that he's not going to get away with it this time, and he used some words to make sure that it was clear, based upon Mr. Martin's race, that he was going to follow him and disobey what the police department told him to do by staying in the car. Damn, that son of a so-and-so, we're not going to let him get away with it. So he followed him based upon his race. Had Mr. Martin not been black, he would have never gotten out of that car, he would have never followed him, and would have never shot him.
But you have people who say, look, Congressman Jeffries, the state did not bring these issues up. At the end, in closing, we heard the question of, well, if the races were opposite, if George Zimmerman were African-American and Trayvon Martin had been white, would this dynamic be different here? They alluded to it, but there are those who say the state did not dwell on it because there's no proof that this was about race. Well, what do you say to those people?
The state has its process, and I respect the jury's verdict. I strongly disagree with it, but now the federal government has its process where the question of race in our nation's civil rights laws will be squarely at issue. George Zimmerman targeted Trayvon Martin as a potential criminal because Trayvon Martin is black. He followed Trayvon Martin because he was black.
When you say that, what do you specifically point to? We know we heard him on tape in saying they always get away and use a profanity, but he didn't say, you know, these N-words get away with this, or you know, something that was proven. People believe that they heard some other things, but there was nothing proven in court as far as a racial slur specifically directed at Trayvon Martin.
Well, the law doesn't require the use of a racial slur. There's no evidence that a racial slur, for instance, was necessarily used in the federal prosecution of the officers accused of beating Rodney King, two of whom were ultimately convicted of a hate crime. In this particular instance, George Zimmerman has a history of targeting African Americans for suspicion in the past.
And you're referring to those other calls that he made to the police, and in all of those cases, I believe almost all of them, there was an African American that he was calling the police about.
Absolutely, and we also know Trayvon Martin had no gun, he had no knife, he had no weapon, there were no furtive movements. The only thing he had was a package of Skittles, and yet George Zimmerman identified him as someone for possible criminal suspicion. The only question, and the one that the federal prosecutors need to closely examine, is was Trayvon Martin shot because he was black?
Congressman Meeks, what timeline are you looking at here? We're hearing, you know, pressure, immediate reaction. We know that this has always been on the radar of the Department of Justice. It's been investigated. It's not as if they're starting at zero at this point. What timeline are you looking at?
No, I'm not going to put, I respect what the Attorney General Holder has said. Do your thorough and complete investigation. I believe once that is done, that would then lead to a grand jury, and we'll move forward from there. But to say, you know, I'm a former prosecutor, and I know what you want to do. You want a thorough case. If you do something hastily, then you don't have a solid case. Do the investigation. Take your time, Mr. Holder. Make sure that the people know that you are looking at it, and then I believe that justice in the end will be with another jury.
Let me get your both reaction quickly to Joe Scarborough has an op-ed on Politico. I've brought it up already this morning. He talked about how this somehow fell in a political realm and that you had conservatives, for whatever reason, rallying instantly around George Zimmerman. Even he was appearing on Hannity's show and so on and so forth, which was brought up in court. And liberals, as he saw it, automatically lining up on the side, if you will, of Trayvon Martin. How did this turn into this, not a black and white divide, almost as a liberal conservative divide as he sees it, Joe Scarborough? What do you think?
Well, I've been pleased that as I've watched the peaceful demonstrations of the individuals who are upset with this verdict all across America come from every background. They were black, they were white, they were Hispanic, they were Asian, and I don't know what their political affiliations may or may not have been, but it tends to tell me that if you're a mother, no matter whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, whether you're liberal or conservative, you would be concerned about your son being shot.
Congressman Jeffries.
Now, an innocent, unarmed African-American teenager was shot dead in cold blood. And I think every American of decency and grace should look at that with compassion and know that something went wrong, particularly given the injustice of a verdict that doesn't hold anyone accountable. As it relates to the conservative-progressive divide, you know, the issue of the Stand Your Ground legislation, which is a conservative initiative, and provided George Zimmerman with a defense, I believe an unfortunate one, does create for the possibility of partisan views to creep into this dynamic. Fortunately, at the federal level, the Stand Your Ground defense, we believe, will not be available to Mr. Zimmerman, and so the facts can be evaluated on a more objective basis.
Thank you both for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Congressman.